Hello and welcome into Mariners Monday. I'm Austin Rooney, one of the broadcasters for the Harwich Mariners, alongside my guest this week, Will Matthiessen, who is a two-way player out of Stanford University. Thank you for coming on the show this week.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And Will, you pitched quite well so far on the Cape. 4 innings pitch, allowed just 1 run as you transition from a bullpen guy to a starter. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the interview. But I'd like to start with your decision to go to Stanford. You come out of high school as one of the top 5 recruits out of Oregon. And there's some really good baseball programs in Oregon, such as Oregon State. So what prompted you to go to Stanford?
Yeah, when I was making my college decision, my parents always, pressed good academics into my life, growing up and into high school. And, when Stanford came around and started showing a little interest, it was too good of an opportunity to pass up, I guess, with, the combination of the athletics and the academics and it being one of, the premier universities in the world. So it just was something I couldn't pass up.
So what are you studying now at Stanford?
So my major is management science and engineering. It's kind of a combination of business and engineering. I don't really know what I want to end up doing with it, but it's a major that allows me to be flexible in what I want to do in my career, and could lead to a number of different things. So
yeah, it sounds like you have a number of pathways open after baseball. Well, I know you couldn't come to Harwich until about a week ago. You had exams, is that right?
Exactly. I didn't finish school until June 13th. So
I was out, I think, May 13th, so about a month earlier. Well, since you couldn't come here a week ago, of course the work is very difficult at Stanford. It's one of the top 5 universities in the country. So how have you been able to balance your academics with your hectic athletic schedule?
It's tough. It is tough just because, we're expected to do all the same schoolwork that, all the other regular students are, but we have 20 hours a week of baseball on top. I don't know. You really got to figure out what to do with time management. I think that's the most important thing. And oftentimes it seems like all I'm doing is sleeping, playing baseball, and doing schoolwork. So, I love it. So.
Transitioning away from Stanford into talking about how you're a two-way player. Not many two-way players left in baseball. And out of high school, were you primarily a fielder or a pitcher? What did you see yourself as going into college?
So primarily, I saw myself as an infielder, actually, and that's kind of what I was recruited as to Stanford. And then once I got there, the coaches knew that I had thrown in high school, so they had me throw a little bit in the fall, and I ended up doing really well on the mound. First base and third base were both occupied with returning starters, so I knew my opportunities might be slim as far as swinging the bat goes. But I was lucky enough to perform well in the fall and earn myself a pretty prominent relieving role my freshman year. And ended up throwing and not hitting my freshman year, which was a little bit of a shakeup or turnaround from what I thought would be the outcome. But it was great. So were you a little bit surprised when you saw that you were going to be a pitcher at Stanford? Did you think of yourself as a pitcher, I guess, coming in at all? A little bit, yeah. I definitely wasn't expecting to throw as many innings as I did, just because, coming in I was thinking, infield and offense was, going to be my primary focus. But I was fortunate enough to, have that or become one of our prominent relievers, like I said, and then last year was kind of the best of both worlds. I got to come out of the bullpen and then I DH for a majority of the year, so I got to do both last year, which was awesome.
So when you started getting at bats your sophomore year, did you expect to get those at bats, or did that just sort of come along, or how did that situation present itself?
Yeah, so I kept swinging it. Last summer I swung it, and in the fall I ended up hitting really well, and so I was talking with my coaches and they were saying, I got a real shot at, DHing or maybe playing somewhere in the field, this coming year. But then I had a little bit of arm issues at the beginning of the school year, so then I shut down everything, didn't throw, didn't take any reps in the field, and just kind of focused on hitting for the time being. And then once I came back and was able to start throwing again, that's kind of when I started, DHing for us, and then relieving and coming in and throwing about 20 innings. I think it was 20 innings. So
I guess transitioning from there to Harwich and what you're doing right now, you told me after one of your last starts that you're looking to transition from a bullpen guy to a starting pitcher, and you think that will help with your hitting schedule. How is that going to free up some at-bats?
Yeah, I think just being a starter in general is easier on the arm because you can develop a schedule. You know exactly when you're throwing, and you can plan out your week based off of when you're throwing, instead of, as a reliever, you always got to be ready and you always got to be available to go warm up in the bullpen and stuff. So I was saying, as far as like hitting goes and playing the field, being a starter one day and then playing the field the next 2 games, or however it may be, it just works out better in my opinion as far as the schedule goes.
And you're not a traditional pitcher. You got a cutter. There are not many pitchers left in baseball who throw a cutter. So what makes your cutter so effective, and how did you develop that pitch?
So I think my junior year of high school, I developed the cutter. It was just, messing around with my pitching coach, throwing a bunch of different pitchers, and the cutter was something that just kind of stuck. Because, it was something I could throw with my fastball that was supposed to look exactly like my fastball and then just break a little bit at the last second and miss barrels and get some swings and misses. Now it's developed into probably my best pitch. It's probably the pitch I rely on most, which has been huge to my success, I think.
And how have you been able to develop that over the past 3-4 years?
I think just sticking with it and trying to throw it, exactly like I throw my fastball, with just a small little difference, so that when it comes out of my hand, it looks exactly like a fastball, and a hitter thinks it's a fastball, and then when he swings or takes, it turns out to be a cutter, and gets weak contact, or like I said, swings and misses.
And now we got a bit of a different question for you. Jumping into Major League Baseball, there's a discussion right now in the National League as to whether the pitcher should still hit or whether they should add the designated hitter spot. So as a two-way player, someone who pitches and hits, do you think all pitchers should have to hit?
I mean, I don't know. It's a tough conversation to have, just because there's so many guys out there that focus only on pitching, and when they're asked to step into the box, they'd have no idea what they're doing. But for me personally, I don't think I'd have a problem with allowing pitchers to hit, because maybe if one day I do end up in the National League, I'd get to again have the best of both worlds.
You're like a Shohei Ohtani out there.
Yeah, something like that.
So now talking about different sports, I know that your grandmother was a star tennis player, at least she was #1 in her age group is what you told me, and then I know that you also consider tennis one of your hobbies. Did you ever think about going into tennis as opposed to baseball?
Not really. It was just something I did growing up, because I got a pretty deep family background in tennis with my grandma, like I said, and my grandpa, he played soccer at Yale, and so I have a fairly athletic background. But growing up, I just was one of those kids that played as many sports as he could, just have fun and take up time.
And at what point did baseball really become your #1 sport?
So I think it was the summer after my freshman year, I decided to put most of my focus into baseball, because leading up to that point, I was baseball and basketball pretty evenly, and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do as far as college. But I figured after my freshman year to put more focus into baseball and the basketball, because I figured my future would be brighter in baseball than it would in basketball.
Well, it says you're 6'5". I think you must be 6'7", so I guess you must have been pretty good at basketball back in high school and middle school as well.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be on 4 straight, state championship basketball teams in high school. That's not all due to me, obviously. That's due to being on great teams. But I'm definitely a little taller than 6'5". I know that's what it says on the Stanford roster, but I think I'm right in between 6'6" and 6'7", so yeah.
I mean, I'm 6'4", 6'5", and I know there's no way you're 6'5".
Yeah, exactly.
So, I know that there's some young Mariners fans who will be listening to the podcast, and what would you tell them with respect to athletics and school moving forward?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to get good grades. That's something I'm very thankful that my parents, pressed me with growing up. Because if you get good grades, it's only gonna help. If you're a good athlete, because good grades can get you into school, and then athletics can also get you into a school. And there's no issue with having good grades. So the most important thing I'd say is to keep your grades up and work hard in school.
And if you keep your grades up, you'll have more options if you're good at sports as well. I mean, look at you going to Stanford.
100%.
A number of different options, I'm sure.
100%. Yeah.
So in closing, I know Mariners fans have gotten to know you on the field. How would you describe yourself off the field?
I describe myself as a pretty laid-back individual. Love to hang out with friends, love to hang out with family. You know, I've got a good group of friends back home. You know, I'm getting to know all these guys out here, and they're awesome. And I got a great host family, so you know, I'd say I'm fairly laid back. You know, not a super intense person by any means, but yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, Will.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.